I want to stick on the energy theme here for a moment. I want to talk about an issue we've discussed a lot on this program. We've crossed to four corners of the country, really, looking at four corners. Now, there's a Freudian slip. I'll come to that in a moment. But we've gone to communities where they're railing against transmission lines, against offshore wind projects, against wind turbine projects, against solar farms. And interestingly, on the ABC last night, the Four Corners program had a look at this issue. Now, do you think they took their traditional stance of supporting communities who are worried about developments ruining their environment? No, because this is about renewable energy. The ABC was very much in the case that somehow these renewable energy projects should be able to stampede over the top of these pesky protesters. Here's a little snippet of the program.
This post from Suzanne is clearly misleading. Even if the offshore wind farm goes ahead, this is not the view you'll ever see from the beaches of Gergrath Bay. This is one of Martine's posts. It was actually blocked by independent fact checkers. It says here that the post had no basis in fact. Alongside legitimate concerns about marine life, a post on everything from COVID conspiracies to climate change denialism and how offshore wind farms kill whales.
Yeah, there's a turnaround for the books. The ABC actually criticising the protesters who are trying to stop developments. I want to go to environmentalist and photographer Steven Nowakowski. Now, we've caught up with him before because he's campaigned against wind farm projects in far north Queensland. Good to speak to you, Steven. You were featured in that Four Corners program. I found it mildly amusing to suddenly see the ABC, instead of trumpeting the cause of protesters, were trying to sort of tear you down and undercut you. They're suggesting that a lot of the protests against wind farms and against offshore wind and against solar farms are actually being supported by the fossil fuel industry. What did you make of all that?
Well, yeah, I'm not supported by the fossil fuel industry, that's for sure. It was very hard to be involved in that program, and it was a shame that it started off with me being invited into Colin Boyce's electorate, but that's what it is. And I went to that electorate because I wanted to learn what was going on in that electorate in terms of renewable energy. And that particular electorate actually has the largest number of proposed wind farms in the state. And my background is cartography, map making, and I've been able to map where these projects are going across the state. And I'll talk to anybody and anyone about what's in the pipeline for Queensland. And one thing that the ABC Four Corners didn't publish, which I did tell them, is the data that I've accumulated. And what we're seeing here in Queensland is well over 4,000 wind turbines that are proposed for the Great Dividing Range of this state. And that's going to deliver around 22 gigawatts of electricity at nameplate capacity. And you have to remember that wind turbines only go at, say, 25-30% nameplate capacity or capacity factor. So we need to really double or triple that number to around 8,000 turbines and above, just to keep the lights on in Queensland on a summer's night. And so it's that sort of information that wasn't portrayed in that program.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the issue, not so much Four Corners now, because they'll run their stuff. I just thought that was kind of interesting in passing. But the key point here, and the argument that was run by some of the people in that program, and it's run out in the public debate, is that the government should be able to sort of fast-track these renewable energy projects, because while, of course, there's environmental damage to bushland where they put wind turbines or the like, there's an environmental benefit overall because of how it improves the climate. They're essentially saying there should be a trade-off. The climate benefits should outweigh the destruction of habitat and the like. Now, this is something that you must be absolutely focused on. Do you buy that argument at all?
Right. For me, there's no compromise. You can't save the climate by destroying forests. The first thing we must do to tackle the climate crisis is you keep trees in the ground and you keep existing forests intact and biodiversity functioning, because the backstop to climate change is biodiversity. We need to keep biodiversity. And what's happening in Queensland is our biodiversity is actually in the hilltops, the remnant forests, the remnant mountaintops where there hasn't been any clearing. And it's those places that are now being targeted by the wind industry. And so it's an oxymoron to think that we can clear forests to save the climate. And that's what we're seeing here in Queensland. And another thing that that Four Corners didn't publish is the fact that we've mapped 114,000 hectares of classified remnant forests in Queensland to be impacted upon with this rollout of renewables in the pipeline right now, the 4,000 turbines. And I shake my head in disbelief that we're going down this path.
We will keep in touch with you, Stephen, on these issues. I'm envious of you. I like your location better than mine just at the moment. It looks just beautiful.
Right, yeah, just at Nugga Nugga National Park. Thank you.
Brilliant
Thanks,
stuff. Steven Nowakowski there at Nugga Nugga National Park up at Kuranda in Queensland. Beautiful stuff.